I was driving through Kentucky when I found the motel. I hadn't planned to stop, but I'd been on the road for 10 hours and my eyes were getting heavy. The sun was setting behind a layer of clouds, and the last gas station I passed had a flyer taped to the door. The Valley in $39.99, a night, clean, quiet, safe. There was a phone number and an arrow drawn in black marker pointing down a road I almost missed. The place didn't look bad when I pulled in. Fresh coat of paint, the parking lot patched up recently, a couple of small trees planted near the entrance. It was weirdly nice for the price. I almost turned around thinking I had the wrong place. But the front office was open and the sign said, vacancy. I figured maybe it was new or the owner was trying to boost business. Inside, the man at the front desk greeted me with a smile. Looked to be in his early 50s, clean polo shirt, quiet voice. I told him I needed a room for 2 nights. He said I was in luck, he had just one left. Room 11. I pulled out my card, but he offered a $10 discount if I paid cash up front. I had a $100 bill in my wallet, so I handed it over. He counted the change slowly, then gave me an actual key. Not a card, a metal key with a tag that said 11. He told me where to park and said if I needed anything, just knock. His office was open 24/7. Room 11 was at the end of the row. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fresh paint. Inside, the room was small but clean. Twin bed, wooden desk, TV on a stand, a full-length mirror, a small fridge. The sheets were crisp, the bathroom spotless. No weird smells, no stains. Honestly, it was better than some big-name chains I'd stayed in before. But there was one thing that stood out, the closet. It was just to the right of the bathroom door, about 4 feet tall, painted the same cream color as the walls. But instead of a knob, it had a steel hasp and a padlock. At first I thought maybe it was a utility closet or where they kept extra linens. It didn't bother me much at the time. I dumped my bag on the bed, changed shirts, and laid down with the TV on low until I fell asleep. That night was uneventful. I woke up a couple times just out of habit. My body doesn't sleep well in strange places, but nothing strange happened. I got up early the next morning, showered, grabbed some breakfast from a diner across the street, and spent the day driving around. Visited a small state park nearby, took a few photos, got lunch, and drove back around sunset. When I got back to my room, everything looked the same. The bed was made, though I hadn't asked for housekeeping, and my things were just where I left them. I sat at the desk for a while scrolling through my phone. Eventually, I turned on the TV again and laid down. Around midnight, I turned off the lights and tried to sleep. That's when I heard the sound. It was faint at first, soft like fabric moving, or maybe someone shifting their weight. I sat up. It was coming from the closet. I stared at it for a while. The padlock was still there, looked untouched. I figured maybe it was something settling inside. Pipes maybe, or an animal. But then there was a knock, quiet, from inside the closet. I froze. Not loud, not like banging, just a soft single knock. Then silence. I waited. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I got up slowly and stepped toward the closet. I didn't touch it, just leaned in close. I put my ear to the door, breathing, not mine, slow, deep, rhythmic, like someone sleeping. I stepped back fast, grabbed my bag and phone, and left the room. I didn't even lock the door. I walked straight down the hall to the office and knocked on the glass. The owner came out from a back room, eyes tired. He asked if everything was all right. I told him there was someone in the closet. I didn't care if it was a mistake or something I imagined, but I needed him to check. He looked at me for a second, like he was trying to decide something. Then he asked, "Room 11?" I nodded. He frowned slightly, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small ring of keys. He followed me back down the hall without saying anything. When we got to the room, I pushed open the door. The padlock was on the floor. The closet door was open. I didn't say anything at first. Neither did he. We both just stared. Inside, the closet was completely empty. No shelves, no supplies, nothing. Just dust. A little dirt along the back wall, a dead moth in the corner. Nothing that could have made a sound. I looked at him. His expression hadn't changed. Then he said, "You locked this door when you left earlier, right?" I nodded. I always do. It's just habit." He bent down, picked up the padlock and turned it over in his hand. Then he knelt and checked the hasp on the door. No damage. It hadn't been broken or forced. It looked like someone had used a key to open it. He didn't offer an explanation. He just said if I wanted a different room, he'd give me one. Room 7 was open. I didn't argue. He gave me a new key and helped carry my bag over. I tried to act calm, but my stomach was twisting. I kept looking back down the hall toward room 11. This door was still wide open. The closet, too. That night, I barely slept. I kept the bathroom light on and sat up in bed for hours. I kept thinking about that breathing. It wasn't just the sound. It was how close it had been, like someone was standing right behind the door. I left early the next morning. Didn't ask for a refund. Didn't even check out, just left the key on the desk and drove off. Weeks later, I still thought about it. That room, that closet, that sound. I tried to find information online. The motel had a website, a few reviews, all decent. Nothing about room 11 or anything strange. I even called once, blocked my number. The same man answered. I hung up, but something kept bothering me. The owner didn't seem surprised. Not really. He had the keys ready. Knew which room I was in before I told him. Knew the closet was locked. Asked if I'd locked the room, not the closet. Like he already knew someone or something had been in there. No one should have had access to that lock but him. No one should have been able to get in or out. And yet, someone had. I'll never know for sure what happened in that room, but one thing sticks with me more than anything else. The sound I heard that night, it wasn't someone trying to get out. It was someone waiting for me to open the door. I was on a solo trip through the Southwest, driving from New Mexico toward California. I wasn't in a rush, just wanted to get away from everything for a while. I stopped in Arizona late one afternoon, some nowhere town off the highway, just tired enough that I didn't care where I ended up for the night. I pulled into this small, dusty motel on the edge of the road. You know the type, one level, maybe 10 rooms max, faded yellow paint peeling off the stucco, a rusted vending machine that probably hadn't worked since 2008. The sign said Desert Star Motel. Half the bulbs were burnt out, the other half flickered like they couldn't decide whether to stay on or die completely. I walked into the office, and the air conditioning was barely working. There was a desk with a bell, and behind it sat a woman in her 60s. She didn't look up when I came in, just kept tapping at a greasy keyboard with one hand and eating crackers with the other. Her shirt was stained with what looked like mustard. When I told her I needed a room for one night, she slid a paper across the counter, told me it was $48 cash, and gave me a key with a red plastic tag. Room 5. The hallway outside the rooms was dim and buzzing from a flickering light overhead. My door had dents in it and chipped paint around the lock. I let myself in and took a look around. The place wasn't great, but I'd stayed in worse. There was a bed, queen-sized, thin mattress, and a single nightstand with a cheap lamp. The curtains were sun-faded pink and didn't quite meet in the middle. The fluorescent ceiling light hummed, casting a cold white glow across the stained beige carpet. The bathroom door creaked and barely shut all the way. Still, it had what I needed. A lock on the door, a working shower, a passable bed, and surprisingly decent Wi-Fi. I set my backpack on the chair by the window and plugged in my phone. Scrolled a bit, checked maps. Nothing much around. Closest gas station was a mile back. I'd already eaten earlier, so I figured I'd just kill time and crash early. I watched a few videos, took a quick shower, had to wear sandals because the tub was stained a weird orange color, and then got into bed around midnight. I must have fallen asleep around 1:30, but at exactly 1:07 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not frantic, just a calm, single knock. Then another. I sat up, heart already going faster. My first thought was maybe someone had the wrong room. Maybe they were drunk. I stayed quiet and moved toward the door, slowly, and looked through the peephole. A man stood there. He looked about mid-40s, clean-shaven, neat hair, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. Not dirty, Not twitchy. Not someone who looked like he was on drugs or homeless. He looked totally normal. But the weirdest thing was how calm he looked. Not confused or embarrassed like someone who knocks on the wrong door usually is. He just stood there and said, in a flat voice, "I think you're in my room." It didn't even register at first. I said through the door, "What?" He said again, like a recording, "I think you're in my room. I was told to come here." I didn't open the door. I told him I'd booked the room through the front desk. He didn't leave, didn't argue, just kept standing there, not knocking anymore, not saying anything, just staring at the door like he was waiting for something. My hands were shaking when I called the front desk. Took forever for the woman to pick up. I told her some guy was at my door saying it was his room. She sounded half asleep and not the least bit surprised. She just said, "There's nobody else assigned to that room. Just ignore him. He'll go away." Then she hung up. I put the chain lock on the door, double-checked the knob, and stepped back. The guy was still there. I didn't look through the peephole again. I didn't want to see him staring. I just stood in the middle of the room, holding my phone, unsure what to do. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even say? That someone was politely insisting I was in their room? 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. I never heard him walk away, but when I finally looked again, the hallway was empty. No one outside. I didn't sleep much after that. I laid in bed fully clothed, heart jumping at every sound. I kept thinking he might come back, maybe with someone else. I kept imagining hearing the door handle rattle, but it never did. As soon as the sun came up and the light started bleeding through the thin curtains, I got up, packed my bag fast, and checked out. No one was at the front desk. Just a handwritten note that said, "Leave key in drop box." I didn't bother asking any questions. As I walked down the short row of rooms, something made me stop in my tracks. I was passing room 4, the one right next to mine. The door was wide open. No lights inside. No movement. Just open. I don't know why I looked, but I stepped close enough to peek in. There was no furniture, no bed, no nightstand, just a dirty floor and a busted TV lying sideways on the ground with its screen cracked. The curtains were torn. In the middle of the room, right in the center, was a single rolled-up sleeping bag, perfectly rolled. No suitcase, no pillow, just that. There was a crushed plastic water bottle in the corner. The wallpaper on one side had peeled down to reveal drywall. It didn't look like a room that had ever been in use. Not recently, not for paying guests, but someone had clearly slept there. I stood there for a long minute, then turned and walked to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't tell anyone, just drove. Later that day, I kept thinking about it. That guy didn't seem like a crackhead. He didn't seem drunk or crazy, but he was too calm, too sure that room 5 was his, as if someone had actually told him to go there. And when I saw that sleeping bag in room 4, it clicked. He wasn't staying at the motel officially. He was just there, like he'd been living in that empty room next to mine. No one assigned it to him. No one even mentioned it. Maybe the woman at the front desk knew. Maybe she didn't care. But someone had been staying in that room, right next to mine, with nothing but a sleeping bag and a busted TV. And at 1 in the morning, he'd walked over, calm as ever, and told me I was in his room. I never figured out who he was or what he really wanted. But I've never stayed at a roadside motel since. Not alone. Not without checking every room next to mine first. I was somewhere between Utah and California, drifting along a quiet stretch of desert highway that looked the same for miles. No real landmarks, no billboards, just flat land and scraggly bushes that blurred together under my headlights. I'd been driving since early morning, trying to make it to Reno before midnight, but by around 11:30 p.m., my eyes were burning and my back felt like it had been punched by a dozen fists. I kept blinking longer than I should have, catching myself drifting over the line again and again. When I saw the dim yellow sign that just said "Motel" in flickering red neon, I didn't even hesitate. I turned into the gravel lot without thinking twice. It was one of those old roadside places, long single-story strip with 20 or so doors, all lined up under a sun-faded awning. The office was a tiny box of a room with a cracked window and a dull buzzing light overhead. Only 2 cars were in the lot. One beat-up silver sedan near room 7, and a dark pickup parked all the way down by room 18. I grabbed my bag and walked into the office. The woman behind the counter didn't look up right away. She was older, probably mid-60s, with stringy gray hair tied in a low ponytail. She was smoking something that smelled like cloves, and there was a small TV on behind her playing some muted infomercial. When she finally looked up, she just pushed a clipboard toward me without saying anything. I filled in my name, fake phone number, and handed her cash. She gave me a worn metal key attached to a thick green plastic tag. Room 19. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked back out into the night. The air was still and dry, but it felt weirdly thick. I didn't notice it at first, just how quiet everything was. No crickets, no wind, just the hum of the motel sign and the crunch of gravel under my feet. Room 19 was second to last on the row. I slid the key into the lock, twisted it hard. It stuck a little, and then pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Not smoke, not mildew, bleach. Strong, heavy bleach, like someone had dumped a bottle of it on every surface and shut the door. I stood there for a few seconds, just breathing it in, and not in a good way. It made my eyes water a bit. The room itself looked clean, though. Basic setup. 1 queen bed, an old TV bolted to a bracket, a small table with a plastic ice bucket, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. There were faint, wet spots on the carpet near the bathroom door. I stepped on it and it squished a little. Damp, but I was too damn tired to care. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag near the table, and lay down fully clothed. The bed was hard, the pillow lumpy, but I don't think I even lasted a full minute before I passed out. When I woke up, the room was dark except for the red LED numbers on the alarm clock, 2:40 a.m. At first, I wasn't sure what woke me. Then I heard it, this steady, dull banging sound, rhythmic like something hitting a wall. At first, I thought it might be plumbing or an old AC unit cycling on and off. I lay there listening. 1, 2, 3, pause. Then again, bang, bang, bang. I sat up and looked around the room. Nothing looked different, but the noise kept going. I got up and walked toward the bathroom, pressing my ear to the wall that connected to the next room, room 20. The banging was louder here, followed by something else. A cough, not sharp or dry, but wet. Sick, a thick, strained kind of cough. Then very faint, a voice, not loud, not clear, just one word, barely audible. Help. It wasn't dramatic, just a whisper, like someone saying it for the 10th time, losing hope anyone would hear. I stepped back, trying to process it. Then I went to the little motel phone on the table. I picked it up and pressed 0 for the office. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. I waited a bit, then called again. Still nothing. I stood there, hand hovering over the receiver, thinking maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe someone left a radio on in the next room and it just sounded like someone asking for help. But that didn't feel right. Eventually, I threw on a hoodie and opened my door. The night air was cold on my bare feet. I walked the couple steps over to room 20 and knocked softly. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Nothing. Then I tried the knob. Turned. The door creaked open an inch. I hesitated, heart starting to pick up. Then I pushed it the rest of the way open. Inside was black. No TV, no light, no movement. I stood there a moment, listening. No banging, no coughing. Just silence. I reached in and flipped the wall switch. Click. The overhead light flickered, then came on with a weak yellow glow. The room was completely empty. No bed, no table, no dresser, no lamp. Not even a curtain on the window. Just stained carpet and walls with faded outlines where furniture used to be. There was dust in the corners and a few random scuff marks on the floor, but it looked like no one had been in there for a long time. No sign of anyone. I backed out slowly, shut the door, and locked it out of habit. Then I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the door like it might open again. When I went back to my room, something felt different immediately. The smell, the thick bleach stench was gone. Not faded, gone. And something else had replaced it. Subtle at first, but I recognized it instantly. Copper. That raw, metallic smell, like rusted pipes. Or blood. I stood just inside the doorway, sniffing the air, trying to place it. Then I walked over to the bathroom. The floor was dry now. No dampness, no bleach. I turned on the light and checked around. Nothing unusual. But the copper smell was stronger in there. I opened the cabinet under the sink. Empty. I opened the shower curtain. Nothing. But the drain had a dark ring around it. Faint, almost scrubbed clean, but not quite. I walked out and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet, trying to make sense of it all. After a few minutes, I got up and tried the front desk again. Still no answer. I thought about leaving, grabbing my keys and getting back on the highway. But I was exhausted and freaked out and didn't know what I'd even tell the cops. Hey, someone said help next door, but there's no furniture in there. I couldn't prove anything. So I locked my door, pushed the small table in front of it, and left the bathroom light on. I didn't sleep much. Every creak made me sit up. Every gust of wind outside felt like footsteps. But nothing else happened. When morning came, I packed up fast. The parking lot was empty except for my car. The pickup from the night before was gone. No sign it had even been there, no oil spots, no tire marks in the gravel. I went to the office. The door was locked. A handwritten sign in the window said, "Back in 10," but there was no time written on it. I dropped the key through the slot and left. About a mile down the road, I stopped at a gas station to fill up and grabbed coffee. I told the guy at the counter about the motel. Just casually, like, "Weird place. You ever been there?" He gave me a confused look. "What motel?" "That one just past mile marker 233. Big red sign. Says, motel." He shook his head. "Man, there's nothing out there. That place burned down years ago." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, took my coffee, and got back in the car. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I still think about that whisper. Not loud, not desperate, just tired. Help. I was passing through Texas on my way to El Paso when I decided to spend the night just outside San Antonio. It was late, around 10:30 p.m., and I'd been on the road all day. I didn't care where I stayed, just needed a bed and a shower. I spotted a small neon sign that said Budget Inn, half its letters flickering, the rest barely visible in the yellow light. It looked old, maybe built in the 70s, with a flat roof and a front office that had bars on the windows. But I was tired, and I wasn't in the mood to be picky. I pulled in, parked under a buzzing streetlight near the front, and walked into the front office. The place smelled like burnt coffee and stale cigarette smoke. There was a man behind the counter, maybe in his 50s, thin, with deep lines under his eyes like he hadn't slept properly in years. I asked for a room for the night, paid in cash, and signed the logbook. He gave me an old plastic room key, the kind you barely see anymore, the kind with a room number stamped on a plastic tag. Room 6. The hallway to the rooms was dim. Fluorescent lights above flickered on and off in slow, irregular intervals. The carpet smelled faintly of mildew and looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. Faded red with dark stains along the edges where it met the wall. Room 6 was near the end of the hall, just past the ice machine that wasn't working. The door had chipped paint around the knob and a small dent near the bottom like someone had once kicked it. I slid the key in. It stuck a little, and then the door creaked open. Inside, the room was exactly what you'd expect from a $40 motel. One queen bed with flat pillows and a thin floral bedspread, a dresser with one missing drawer, and a TV that looked too old to have any kind of ports or remote. A small lamp on a table next to the bed provided the only real light. There were no pictures on the walls, just faded wallpaper that peeled slightly at the corners. The bathroom was small but clean enough. I didn't bother unpacking. I took a quick shower, left my bag on the chair, and lay down. I was out within minutes. I slept surprisingly well. No noise, no interruptions. I actually remember waking up once around 4 a.m. because I was cold. The thin blanket barely helped, but I didn't want to get up and mess with the heater. I just rolled over and went back to sleep. In the morning, I got dressed, grabbed my stuff, and headed to the office to check out. That's when things got strange. The same man was at the desk, sitting in the same spot, but when I said I was checking out of room 6, he gave me a strange look. Like he didn't know what I was talking about. He asked what name I used, and I told him. He opened the logbook and flipped through the pages. He kept flipping. Then he looked at me again and said there was no record of me ever staying there. I walked around the counter, pointed at the page I remembered signing the night before. My name wasn't there. It just skipped from one guest to another. No entry for me, no room 6. I thought maybe he was messing with me. I pulled the key out of my pocket and showed it to him. His face went pale. He asked where I got it. I told him he gave it to me. He looked at the key again and shook his head slightly. Said they hadn't used keys like that in years. Said the motel switched to electronic cards 2 summers ago. He even pulled out a drawer and showed me the new ones. All identical plastic cards with magnetic strips. I started to feel off balance, like I was losing my grip on something. I insisted he walk with me to room 6. He didn't argue. We went down the hallway together. I remember passing the same ice machine, still broken, the same stained carpet. But when we got to room 6, something was wrong. The door was different. There was no number on it, just a faint outline where numbers had once been screwed in. The doorknob was newer, like it had been replaced recently. The man unlocked it with a master key he had on a ring, and when he opened it, I just stood there. The room was nothing like what I'd slept in. There were no sheets on the bed, just a bare mattress, stained and sunken in the middle. The dresser was broken in half. No curtains on the window, just a cracked pane with masking tape along the edge. Dust covered everything. There were spider webs in the corners. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned or touched in months. I stepped inside slowly. My skin started to crawl. I recognized the layout. Same shape, same corners, same fixtures. But it was empty. It didn't smell like me. It didn't look like anyone had been in it for a long time. I checked the bathroom. Dry. Dirty. No towels, no soap. Even the toilet had brown stains in the bowl like the water had sat there for weeks. There was no sign of my stay. Nothing. When we walked out, I felt cold. Not scared. Not exactly. But unsettled. Like I'd walked into someone else's memory and mistaken it for mine. I turned around and looked down the hallway. Then I noticed the small camera above the corner near the ceiling. It was pointed right at room 6's door. I asked the man if we could see the footage. At first, he hesitated, but I think the situation had rattled him too. He said the system was old, but he'd try. We walked to a back room behind the front office. He powered up a small monitor with a blinking light and started scrubbing through the night's footage. At around 10:45 p.m., the front camera showed me walking into the building, alone. I saw myself glance around, talk to him at the counter, then disappear down the hallway. Then we switched to the hallway feed. The grainy black and white footage showed me walking down the hall. I stopped in front of room 6. Then the screen went to static. The feed cut out, just for a few seconds. When it came back on, I was gone. Just an empty hallway again. No door opening. No me stepping inside. Just nothing. He stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He looked shaken, and honestly, so was I. He offered me a refund. I didn't take it. I walked back to my car in silence. The sun was fully up by then. I drove off the lot, got back onto the highway, and didn't look back. I didn't even stop for food until I was hours out. I never figured out what happened. I still had the motel key. Kept it. Sometimes I take it out and just stare at it, turning it in my fingers. I've compared it to pictures online, tried to figure out when it was made, what motel chains used them. Nothing exact comes up. It's like it doesn't belong anywhere anymore. I've thought about it 100 times since. I didn't hallucinate it. I wasn't drunk. I didn't imagine that room. I slept there. I remember the creak of the bed when I turned over. I remember the water pressure in the shower. I remember setting my shoes against the wall in the exact place I always do. I remember the feel of that bedspread, scratchy and thin. I remember being cold, but none of it left a trace. It was like I'd rented a room in a place that had already been forgotten. Like I was borrowing space from a memory that wasn't mine, or maybe wasn't supposed to be there at all. And the camera, the moment that feed cut out, sticks with me more than anything else. It didn't glitch any other time that night. Just when I reached room 6, just when I stepped inside. Whatever happened there, it didn't want to be seen. And somehow, I think it wasn't the room that vanished. I think maybe, just for that night, I did. I was passing through Missouri on a business trip. Nothing major, just a quick stop in St. Louis to meet a supplier, then on the road again. I left later than I planned. Traffic was awful on I-44, and by the time I hit the outskirts of the city, it was almost midnight. I didn't feel like spending another hour looking for a decent place, so I pulled into a roadside motel about 10 minutes off the highway. It looked old, low roof, yellowed walls, flickering sign, *** wagon trail in ***. One of those places you wouldn't glance at twice during the day. But it was late and I was dead tired. There were only a few cars in the lot. I parked near the middle, walked in, and got a room without any hassle. The woman at the front desk barely looked up. She slid a key across the counter without even asking if I wanted a smoking or non-smoking room. Room 12. The hallway smelled like old fabric and cleaning chemicals, the kind of smell that sticks in your nose. The carpet was worn down in the middle, flat where hundreds of feet had passed. Room 12 was at the far end. I opened the door, and right away something felt off. The air inside was cool but stale, like the room hadn't been used in a while. The layout was basic. One queen bed with a sunken middle, small table in the corner, cheap wooden dresser, TV mounted to the wall, microwave that looked like it came from the 90s. The bathroom was just a sliding door to the left, with a flickering light overhead. I dropped my bag on the bed, turned on the AC, and sat down to take off my shoes. That's when I noticed the red stain under the table. It was dark, deep in the carpet, about the size of a basketball, maybe a little bigger. I leaned down to get a better look, sniffed near it. No smell, just looked like old wine or sauce. Ketchup, maybe. I didn't think much of it. I was too tired to care. I checked the sheets for bed bugs, gave the tub a once-over for any weirdness, then crashed into bed without even turning on the TV. Slept straight through the night. No dreams, just dead weight sleep. Next morning, I woke up around 7:30. The sunlight came through the thin, dirty curtains in thin orange lines. I stretched, took a quick shower, then stepped outside to grab a coffee from the lobby. That's when I noticed the housekeeping cart parked right in front of my door. A middle-aged woman in uniform was loading towels into it. She looked at me and smiled. "You're lucky you got 12, she said. I squinted at her, still waking up. "Why's that? We don't usually book that one anymore." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" She paused for a second, then shrugged. "Last year, a man died in there, violently. Cops took all the furniture, tried replacing the carpet, but..." She nodded toward the room. "That stain always comes back." I just stood there, frozen for a second. "You mean it wasn't cleaned?" She gave me a tired smile. "Oh, we clean it every week." I didn't say anything else, just nodded and walked back inside. I stood in the doorway for a minute, staring at that stain again. I had walked right over it. I had put my duffel bag right on the table above it. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my heartbeat climbing. That wasn't wine. That wasn't ketchup. I looked closer. It had a deep brown-red color, soaked into the fibers unevenly, some parts darker than others. The edges were blurry, like it had spread outward. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't even want to breathe near it. I went into the bathroom, brushed my teeth quickly, washed my hands again and again. I packed up faster than I ever had in my life, careful not to let anything touch the floor. I didn't sit on the chair or lean against the wall. I just grabbed my stuff and left. I didn't check out at the front desk. I just left the key on the table and walked out. But the weird thing was, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Asterisk, a man died in there. Violently. Asterisk, that word stuck with me. Asterisk, violently. Asterisk, not just passed away. Not a heart attack or a stroke. Someone died badly in that room. When I got to the gas station down the road, I sat in my car for a while. I pulled out my phone and searched for anything I could find. Motel murder, St. Louis, room 12. Nothing. So I tried wagon trail in St. Louis, man died. After some digging, I found a local news article from the year before. A traveling salesman from Ohio had been found in his motel room. Same address, same motel name. The article was vague, but it mentioned that the body had been discovered 3 days after his death. Neighbors complained of a smell. When police broke in, they found blood all over the carpet. It wasn't clear what exactly happened, but the investigators suspected foul play. No signs of forced entry. No suspects arrested. Cause of death listed as blunt force trauma and multiple sharp injuries. The article ended with a quote from the police saying it was an ongoing investigation. That's it. No follow-ups. No arrests. No suspect descriptions. Just a dead man in room 12 and silence afterward. I sat there for a long time trying to piece it together. Why would the motel keep renting out that room? Why didn't they change the carpet? Why didn't they rip the whole thing out and replace the floor completely? If the stain kept coming back, why not just shut the room down? Or tear it all out? Tile it? Anything? But then I thought about the way the maid said it. Like it wasn't a mystery to her. Like she had seen it again and again. Asterisk, it always comes back. Asterisk, that stuck with me the whole rest of the drive. I kept picturing the way the stain looked. How it didn't have sharp edges. How it had soaked deep, how it didn't smell like anything but still looked wrong. For weeks afterward, I kept checking my bag. I had a weird paranoia that maybe I'd brought something back with me. Not ghosts or curses or anything like that. I don't believe in that stuff, but more like, maybe I had touched something I shouldn't have. Maybe I stepped in something. The idea of someone being killed in that room, and me sleeping right where it happened, just wouldn't leave my head. The idea that the room looked normal from a distance, but just beneath that layer of paint and polish, something terrible had happened. And the people running the place didn't even care. Or maybe they were just used to it. I threw the clothes I wore that night in the trash. Didn't even want to wash them. I kept thinking about how close I had been to that stain. How maybe the guy had crawled, tried to get help, and died right there under the table. I still pass through that area sometimes, but I never stay overnight. And I sure as hell never pull off the road for a motel unless I can see the reviews, pictures, full address, everything. I don't care how late it is. That room was cleaned, yeah, sanitized, bleached, sheets changed, towels folded. But you can't clean something like that away. You can't scrub out the way it felt in there. The air, the stillness, the weight of something violent having happened. Even if the stain faded for a while, something in that room stayed behind. Not a ghost, just the truth, the kind you can feel. I was somewhere in the middle of Idaho, driving through flat land and low hills, nothing but dry fields and old fence posts on both sides of the highway. I'd been on the road for nearly 10 hours, and the light was starting to fade. The sky had that dusty orange look it gets before the sun really drops. My neck was stiff, eyes sore, and I still had hours to go before my next stop. I wasn't even planning on pulling over for the night, but when I saw the old sign, just a plain wooden one that said Valley Pines Motel, I figured I'd stop just for a few hours, get some sleep. The lot was empty except for one other car, a dusty red pickup that looked like it hadn't moved in days. The motel itself was small, maybe 10 rooms all in a row, the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked. White paint peeling off the siding, one flickering bulb over the office door. The place didn't look like much, but it was quiet, and I didn't want to drive any farther that night. I parked in front of the office and stretched my legs, still deciding if I should even bother. When I walked in, the woman behind the desk was already standing. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Gray hair tied back neat, thick glasses, pale sweater. She had this calm, polite look, like someone who'd worked that desk her whole life. Before I said anything, before I even touched my wallet. She said, "Ah, Mr. Tanner, room 8 is ready." I froze for half a second. My last name is Tanner, but I hadn't told her that. I hadn't even spoken yet. I didn't have a reservation either. Nothing online, no call ahead. I was just passing through. I thought maybe she recognized me from my license plate or something weird like that. Small towns remember cars. Still, I asked her how she knew my name. She just smiled a little and said, "You were here last year." I said I wasn't, that I'd never been to Idaho before, never even passed through this side of the state. But she just kept smiling, like she didn't believe me or didn't care. I should have left right then, but I didn't. Maybe it was how tired I was. Maybe I figured she had me confused with someone else. It's not like Tanner is the rarest name in the world. I convinced myself there was a simple answer. I paid cash. $29, no taxes, no ID, no card swipe. She handed me a worn brass key on a leather tag. Room 8. The room was at the far end. I parked right in front of it. Curtains were closed, door slightly swollen from years of weather. It opened with a sticky creak. The inside looked just like you'd expect. Old carpet with cigarette burns, yellow light bulbs, wood-paneled walls. The bedspread was a faded brown. A small TV sat on a metal stand across from the bed. There was a round table in the corner with one chair and a lamp that didn't turn on. The bathroom was clean enough, though the faucet dripped slow and steady. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat down on the edge of the bed, just staring at nothing. My legs ached. My jaw hurt from clenching it on the drive. I rubbed my face with both hands and lay back for a bit, staring at the ceiling. Something about the place felt too quiet. Not peaceful, just heavy. The air smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and something else, maybe old wood or mildew. I didn't bother turning on the TV. I plugged in my phone, then checked it. 2 bars of signal. I opened the camera roll without thinking, trying to find a photo I'd taken earlier that day, just something to post later. But right at the top of the roll, the most recent photo caught my eye. It was of me, sitting on the edge of the bed in room 8. Same pose, same angle, same clothes. I wasn't smiling or anything. I looked tired, like I always do after a long drive. But I knew, deep down, I hadn't taken that photo. There were no mirrors in that direction, and I hadn't set the timer or propped up the phone. The photo was taken from about waist height, like someone had stood at the end of the bed and taken it without me knowing. I sat up, my hands going cold. I checked the timestamp. Exactly 1 year ago, to the day. Same time, almost to the minute. July 14th, 8:42 p.m. My first instinct was that someone had messed with my phone, but I didn't know how. I'd only had this phone for a few months. No backups from old ones. Nothing stored from before. It didn't make sense. I stared at the photo for a long time, zoomed in, looked at the background. Same room, same wallpaper, same crooked lamp on the table. There was a small tear on the curtain in the picture, and I turned my head to look at it in real life. It was there. I felt sick. I got up, grabbed my bag, and was halfway to the door when I stopped. It was dark outside now. Really dark. The kind of dark that feels thick. No other lights on at the motel. I didn't see the red pickup anymore. The office light was off too. I felt like if I went outside right then, I wouldn't like what I saw. So I stayed. I didn't sleep. I sat up in the bed, lights on, door locked, my bag beside me. My phone on the charger, screen face up. Every little noise outside, wind, bugs, the occasional creak from the old building, felt too sharp. I kept waiting for a knock, or footsteps, or the sound of another door opening. Nothing ever came. By 4 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I threw on my hoodie, grabbed my bag, and left the key on the table. I walked fast to my car, looking over my shoulder every few seconds. I unlocked the door, got in, and started the engine without bothering to warm it up. The headlights cut through the dark like a knife. The office was still dark. No sign of the woman. No sign of anyone. I drove until the sun came up. When I stopped for gas 2 hours later, I opened my camera roll again. The photo was gone. I scrolled through every picture. Nothing. Not in the recently deleted folder. Not anywhere. Just gone. Like it had never existed. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. That was me in the picture. That was room 8. I've thought about it 100 times since then. I've looked up the motel, tried to find it again on the map, but nothing comes up. No listing, no address, no Valley Pines Motel anywhere in that part of Idaho. Maybe it's gone. Maybe it never had a website to begin with. Or maybe it's just one of those places that stays hidden unless you need to find it. But I haven't been back. I never will. Every July 14th, I stay home. I turn off my phone. I don't take any photos. And I never, ever go near Idaho. I took a trip up the Oregon coast last November. It was off-season, quiet, gray skies, cold wind. I needed time away from everything: work, noise, people. I didn't want fancy. I just needed a place to crash near the ocean. I found this cheap little motel near a small town, maybe 5 miles from anything else. It looked old but clean enough, and the price was low. 1-story building, faded blue paint, big glass windows with dusty blinds pulled halfway shut. A rusted metal sign out front said Coastal Rest Motel. I pulled in late afternoon, only one other car in the lot. Room 6. The clerk barely looked at me when I checked in. Middle-aged, buzzed hair, heavy-set guy in a Seahawks hoodie. He gave me a paper key card and said something like, "Let me know if the heater gives you trouble. Room's got a mind of its own." I asked if they had coffee in the morning. He just pointed at a machine behind him without saying anything. The room itself was nothing special. Bed with a stiff, squeaky mattress. Old floral blanket. Carpet had worn spots. TV mounted in the corner. Old remote with missing buttons. But it had Wi-Fi, a small table, and a bathroom with hot water. That was enough. I set my bag down, plugged in my phone, and sat on the bed to rest. I wasn't even tired from the drive, just drained in general. When I went to brush my teeth that first night, I noticed the bathroom mirror. It had this odd vertical crack on the left side, just slightly curved like a hairline fracture. I leaned closer. It wasn't broken enough to distort my reflection, just enough to draw your eye. I looked behind it, thinking maybe it was loose, but it was set into the wall. One of those old motel mirrors that look glued into place. I didn't think much of it, just figured the building was old. You see worse in places like that. That night I had trouble sleeping. Not sure why. The heater was working, but it made these random clicking noises. The wind outside kept shifting direction, rattling the loose window pane. Around 1 in the morning, I heard a noise that didn't match the rest. A light, repetitive scratching, like claws or nails on tile. I sat up and listened. Came in short bursts. Tap, tap, scratch, pause, scratch again. It was coming from the bathroom. I got up and turned the light on. The sound stopped. I stepped inside barefoot. Cold tile. Nothing in the sink. Nothing near the vent above the shower. I bent down, listened near the pipes under the sink. Could have been an animal in the walls. Rat maybe, but it didn't sound like scurrying. It had a slow rhythm. I checked behind the curtain, opened the little window. Wind hit me in the face. Nothing outside but darkness and the faint crash of waves somewhere in the distance. I went back to bed and tried to convince myself it was just the pipes settling. Next morning, I walked down the road to a small diner and had eggs and toast. I asked the waitress if the area had many guests this time of year. She said not really. Most people stayed in town. When I told her where I was staying, she kind of nodded but didn't say anything else. I figured maybe it had a reputation, or maybe she didn't care. Back at the motel, I stopped at the front desk and casually mentioned the mirror having a crack. The clerk just shrugged and said, "Old building." Same exact words. Didn't even look up from his crossword. That night, I decided to watch something on my laptop to keep my mind off the weird vibe. I picked a movie, turned the volume low. Around midnight, the scratching came back. Same sound, but louder now, faster. It made my chest tighten. I paused the movie. The sound wasn't random anymore. It had intention, like something trying to get attention. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then a thump, like a knuckle against glass. I stood up slowly. I didn't want to go in the bathroom. My gut told me to just leave it alone. But I couldn't. I stepped toward the door, heart pounding. I turned on the light. The sound stopped. Everything looked normal. But when I moved closer to the mirror and leaned in, I saw something that stopped me cold. The crack on the left side, it looked different, wider, and behind it, just for a second, I thought I saw backslash movement, a tiny flicker, like a shadow shifting just beyond the glass. I lifted my hand, tapped once on the surface, tapped back, directly across from my knuckle. One sharp knock. I froze. It wasn't an echo. It was a response. I backed away slowly. I didn't want to believe what had just happened. My body was trembling. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing hard, listening. Nothing else came. No more scratching. But I didn't sleep. I kept every light on and watched the mirror from a distance. My thoughts spiraled all night. Someone in the walls? Watching me? Waiting? At 3 a.m., I threw my stuff into my bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I didn't check out, didn't even look toward the office. I just got in my car and drove. I drove 4 hours straight to Portland and checked into a proper hotel. I kept the bathroom light on all night. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was scared they wouldn't believe me, but because I didn't understand it myself. I pushed it down, tried to forget. 3 months later, I was scrolling through local news online, looking for road closures before another trip. That's when I saw the article. Man found living in motel walls in coastal Oregon. He had been discovered after a pipe leak forced maintenance to cut open a section of the wall in one of the units. They found a narrow crawl space running behind several rooms. He'd carved out little spaces for himself. Mattress, flashlight, wrappers, old magazines. The report said he had been watching guests through holes hidden behind mirrors and vents. There were tiny eye-level peepholes drilled through the back of several bathroom mirrors. The man was in his 40s. He had no ID. They think he had been living there off and on for years. Quiet, never seen during the day. The police said he had probably memorized the cleaning schedule and only moved around when the rooms were empty. No one knew how long he'd been doing it. I stared at the article for a long time. They included a photo of the motel. Room numbers visible. Mine was one of them. Room 6, the mirror with the crack. I don't know if he was behind that wall when I was there. I don't know if he tapped the glass to scare me or if he thought I was someone else. I don't even know if I was in danger or if he was just watching. But I do know I will never stay in a roadside motel again. I don't care how cheap or convenient, because that sound, the scratching, the knocking, I still hear it sometimes even now when everything's quiet, and I always check the mirror.